So you've got these arcs and this wonderful example of the American monomyth played out in not just the Captain America movies, but Thor, Iron Man, like I said. It was the Avengers, the Avengers coming together. That was a wonderful film, that first movie, about them trying to figure out where's the balance here. How do we come in together, work for a common good, but maintain autonomy? How do they not become Shield's puppets, yet still join together to work together and save the world? How do they do that without, the ultimate example of the zombie mentality was Loki and his staff, and how he totally took over your mind with the Mind Stone. You had different shades of that, different visions of that. And the film was about these characters trying to navigate the various degrees of that. And what did they decide? They decided to maintain their autonomy, yet work together for a common goal. Become the Avengers. It was a wonderful idea and a wonderful film because of that. And the universe carried that through. Eventually, by the time we get to Captain Marvel, and they tried to make her, this was a subtle, just an evil little thing they did at the end of that film, trying to make her the reason why the Avengers got their name, right? Her Avenger was her call sign, on her ship. So that inspired Fury to call the Avengers the Avengers. Baloney. That is ridiculous. What a cheap, ignorant way to try to retcon something in. No. And it takes away, even though we never heard Captain America called the Avenger or anything in that first film, calling the Captain America movie Captain America the First Avenger establishes the fact that the team and the values and the things that the team of the Avengers fight for is based on what Cap established. He was the first superhero. The first superhero in the Marvel Universe. In that timeline of the MCU. Now we have something like the Eternals. And to begin with, I'll echo what just about every remotely intellectual or critical thinking person has said. This trailer is so boring. It's so boring. Let's start there, and then we'll get into some of it, to linking it to what I've been saying before. We don't really have any clear and present evil. They talk about a threat, but what kind of threat could it possibly? Think about it. If these group of the Eternals have been there watching humanity, but not interfering through Loki invading, through Ultron about to cause a cataclysmic, world-ending event, through Thanos himself and the Infinity Gauntlet, and that whole, if those dangers they set back quietly and happily and decided not to interfere, and now you're telling us there's a danger that's so big that they decided to interfere, and you're not even going to hint at that in the trailer, that tells me you've got nothing. You certainly don't have anything that makes sense in terms of that story. There's just nothing there. And people say, oh, it's just a teaser. No, even teasers should give more than that. It's incredibly boring, and it speaks to the fact that the movie, they've got nothing in the movie. And I'll talk about why they have nothing in the movie in a second. What do we see the trailer doing, though? We see the trailer glorying in this team of characters. Now, I never read The Eternals, Jack Kirby's The Eternals. I know sort of the general gist of them, and it's pretty fascinating. It's pretty cool. It's not really the kind of comic book that I would gravitate toward. I like heroes, superheroes. I'm not so much somebody who likes to read like mythology in comic, like proper like space mythology or something like that in comic books. I like the hero genre. I like that. And the hero genre, the comic book superhero. All right, let me explain this. The comic book superhero is intrinsically American. You do not have a comic book superhero story if you remove everything essentially American from the story. It doesn't work. Comic book superheroes in particular, and I don't mean comic books in general, and I don't mean the basic idea of a hero or even somebody with a secret identity. I'm talking about comic book superheroes and all of the tropes and all of the accoutrements that entails. That is uniquely American, and it happened in a unique time in America, and it proved relevant across times because the tensions and the needs of the culture that latched on to Superman and to Batman and to Wonder Woman, they proved that those needs and culture, they were still relevant. And that was why Stan Lee was able to do the Marvel Age, in a different time after World War II, and still bring this idea of this comic book superhero in a slightly different, slightly altered way, but it was still that seminal American fighting for these values and so forth. And it's been relevant in American culture ever since. Now, I do not mean to imply in any way that, if you're not from America, you can't appreciate comic book superheroes. And I also don't mean to imply that different cultures and different countries can't have their own versions of comic book superheroes. Sure. But the MCU is built on the American monomyth, as we just described, with these heroes, and that means it's built on the American comic book superhero. With Captain Marvel, they tried to do a drastic left turn. We've talked about this before, but a left turn, a change from the American superhero archetype, from the American monomyth. They no longer wanted to tell that story. And what we saw was that hard left turn. So Endgame that came right after it, suddenly you have Captain America, of all people, being selfish in the end, deciding, I'm not going to stick around and help you guys anymore. I'm not going to keep up with the relationship that I've already developed with Sharon Carter. I'm just going to go back and be with Peggy now, turn my back on everybody. I'll show up as an old guy and ignore all of the character development that we did with Bucky, and I'll just drop the shield in Sam's lap because diversity points, yay. This was, even though there were some really cool things in Endgame, by the end of it, that Captain America that we had there was not the American monomyth Captain America. Hard left turn at that very end there. Same thing with Thor. Same thing with Professor Soy Hulk. Same thing with all of these nonsense characters that they did in that movie, because Captain Marvel had cued the turn. We're no longer interested in telling American superhero comic book films, comic book superhero movies. We're no longer interested in the American monomyth. Now they're wanting to do something different. And their thought is that the American audiences are just going to shut up and go along, get in the bag. You don't get to say anything. Accept diversity, you racist, you bigot, you misogynist, blah, 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 whatever they want to try to shame you for dare to have a differing opinion from them. That's what they're thinking will happen. And we've seen them try to go off, everybody's going after that sexy China box office money or whatever. It's one thing to be mindful of supply and demand. Movies want to make money, so you want to do a hero that'll appeal to a large audience there that you have in China. Sure, okay, whatever, nothing wrong with that. But taking this whole mythology that's such an intrinsic, ingrained in Americans' culture, take that mythology and try to break it apart and just make it something else is not okay. It's degrading and not good for culture. And it's horrible for just the storytelling in general, because you're not basing it on the hero, not to say nothing of not basing it on the American monomyth, but to not even base it on the hero's journey in general. So what do we see in the Eternals trailer? We see these characters just like, aren't they so cool together? Oh, there's this guy. They don't really bear any resemblance to the cursory research I did on these characters in the comics. Sometimes, if you look at some of the more modern day adaptations, since Marvel went, totally, woke, off the handle, all new, all different Marvel and so forth, you might see some resemblances because they've already altered the character there. But even the names of these Eternals characters, you think Gilgamesh, Circe, Icarus, even though they're spelled slightly differently, these are echoes of Western mythology, Greece and Mesopotamia there with Gilgamesh and whatever. But this is the roots of Western mythology. And what do you see in this movie? You don't see anything. They very carefully didn't show anything remotely American in this trailer at all. And I doubt there's much in the film anyway. And it doesn't have to be set in America. It doesn't have to be, nobody has to be waving a flag. What I'm pointing out is how how it plays into this agenda. Rather than superheroes, rather than individuals standing up and self-sacrificing and saying, this is going to cost me a lot of personal torment and a personal cost to me, but I need to stand up and lay it on the line because others are suffering and others need help. You're not going to see that in this film. The trailer just had them sort of laughing. That stupid joke at the end was it was cringe, obviously. It was so unearned. People talk about, so the one girl who's supposed to be Sprite, I guess, she looks like a typical non-binary woke, poster child. Doesn't look like the character Sprite at all from the comics. But she says, well, now that Captain Rogers and Iron Man are not here, so you notice that subtlety. People have pointed it out, but Iron Man, he's Iron Man, but oh no, Steve Rogers, he's just Captain Rogers. No, Captain America, that's just a title. Anybody can have that. No, we got to he's just Captain Rogers, so that they can try and push this nonsense of Cap Falcon down your throat more. It is true that the mantle was handed down to Bucky in the comics, and then when they tried, with the Nick Spencer tried to make it work with Falcon, it never did. It is true that mantle could be handed down, but even when Bucky had it, it was always under the shadow of Steve Rogers. I mean, Steve Rogers, even long before that, when he went off and became Nomad in the comics, the Captain America mantle was indelibly linked to Steve Rogers. It's not a mantle that can just be thrown around and it's a position that any old body can fill. No, it's indelibly linked. So that was very much on purpose, them saying Captain Rogers and not Captain America at the end of that trailer. But now that Captain Rogers and Iron Man are gone, who will lead the Avengers? And one of the guys, I guess he's playing Icarus, maybe? I don't know. It's like, oh, I'll do it. And then they just all look at each other and kind of laugh. That is the most completely unearned attempt at a joke. We don't know anything about these characters. The trailer didn't even attempt to show us how this Icarus character could be a little of a loose cannon or something like that. Like if you're going to make a joke at the end, make it work. Let's see him drop the ball a little bit or be kind of goofy at some point in the trailer. And then at the end, when he says, oh, I'll be the leader, and they all kind of laugh at him, at least we can kind of get the joke a little bit. But no. Also, they're all around a table eating, because the ideologues are obsessed with eating. They're obsessed with breaking down anything like a body, a healthy body image, right? Body positivity, all of this nonsense. We don't get a villain. It's just the most boring trailer in the world. There's no way in the world that trailer would be even remotely worthy of the media attention it's getting if it wasn't part of the MCU. And not just part of the MCU, but a part of this critical juncture in people who are somehow fooling themselves that the MCU is still something they want to follow. That's the only reason this film's getting any press. Again, they're trying to figure out how in the world do you move forward from this point. You've killed off every original dynamic and character and the people that really the audiences really cared about. You got some of them surviving, Ant-Man, Spider-Man, and so forth, or whatever. But you've killed all of that off. You've made it abundantly clear that you are going in a 100% different direction. How do you even make that remotely interesting? And you also see in the articles that I've read about the Eternals, so they tried to do a little bit of cursory sort of, research on it. But every article talked about the director, Zhao, whatever her name is, and, a woman of color. A woman of color is directing this. A woman of color directing this film. Look, there's nothing wrong. You can have a person, woman, man, any ethnicity, whatever, but the fact that that's the selling point. That's very clear. That's the selling point. That a woman of color is doing this movie. It's almost like that's her qualification. I've never heard of anything else she's ever done. But that's that, and that is, we see that is the qualification. That's this kind of intense affirmative action mindset. That your qualification is your victim points on that intersectional feminist card. How many victim points can you punch on your card? That qualifies you for a job. That qualifies you for people passing over more qualified candidates from a less victimized people group so that you can have the job. And what is that flying in the face of? The work ethic, the American work ethic, the American ethic of social mobility. We know it hasn't always worked out well. We know there's been, obviously slavery in our country and racism and sexism. There's been all these kinds of things in the country. You can't deny that. And those have been impediments, absolutely, to what should be the work ethic of social mobility. But the answer isn't to throw the whole work ethic and meritocracy out the window. No, that's stupid. You don't just throw it all out because it hasn't been properly implemented. You fix it and you properly implement it. You don't throw it all out. And that's what this sort of affirmative action kind of idea does. So this is what they're doing with the director and all of that. I imagine with the cast too, like I said, I don't know, but these characters I'm seeing on screen don't look a whole lot like the original characters that I've seen. Maybe from sort of the new woke Marvel comics nonsense and whatnot, but it's not that. So they're removing everything distinctly American from the film. And again, I don't mean that it has to be set in America. What I'm talking about when I say American is the tie to what is intrinsic to the comic book superhero, which is the American monomyth. So no American monomyth basically means no American superhero. And if you think of the idea of the Eternals, they're not superheroes. They're not. They're comic book characters, but they're not really superheroes. At times in the past, they could have been approached and implemented as sort of superhero-esque. Like I've seen some of the old covers, Icarus against the Hulk and stuff like that, and that could be kind of cool. But they're not individuals. They're not American monomyth protagonists who are normal people who rise up and have given this challenge and decide to do the right thing for the world. They're not that, So it's it's indicative of this hard left turn. Now, people are already saying when it comes out, it's not going to do well. It's not going to do as well as the other ones. And defenders, of course, are trying to say, "Oh, you people are so stupid. You said that about Guardians of the Galaxy too, and that did amazing." Completely different story. Yes, if you were saying that Eternals isn't going to make it just because these are characters that people don't know, then that would be similar to what people were saying about Guardians of the Galaxy, which didn't work at all. That film was wonderful and did incredibly well. It's the approach. The Guardians of the Galaxy, even though only one was human, Star-Lord, all of these characters were incredibly human in their makeup, trying to atone for past wrongs, suddenly trying to be better. I love, Groot and Rocket, for instance, and even Drax, in his, when he finally comes to the realization and knows what he has to do and stuff and sees the wrongs that he's done, this great evil that the universe is going to suffer unless they, rogues that they are, completely unqualified, thugs that they are, crooks that they are, they're the only ones in the right situation and with the right tools in that right situation to actually be able to overcome that evil. And it's a wonderful story of how doesn't matter what you've been through, there's never too late to stand up and do the right thing. What do we see that in the Eternals movie? The trailer's not giving us anything like that. The trailer's just telling us, like these guys, think they're funny, laugh at their jokes, like these guys. This is your new Marvel universe, guys. They're at different parts of the world. It's international. We got our human rainbow. These hit all of the nice woke points. Like them. Make sure you like them. Make sure you laugh at their little joke at the end. Be excited. This is your new MCU. What's exciting about that? What on earth is exciting about that?